Our Faith is a Fundamentals of the Faith series that we do each fall. It's for everybody who's wanting to think about what it is that we do as Episcopalians and as Christians and why. It's especially a good series to be part of if you're thinking about being baptized or confirmed or taking some kind of renewal in faith. So all are welcome. Each year, we also have a focus that we just have as an overarching theme. This year's focus is why church is good for us. Today, we'll hear from Dean Markham on that general theme about why church is good for us. Next week, I'll be speaking about the Spirit and Scripture that guides and shapes us. The week after that, oh, look, you can even see us all on there. The week 3, Elise will be talking about liturgy and music, which helps us lift up our hearts. And week 4, Oren will be bringing it home with common prayer that connects and sustains us. So welcome, welcome. We are delighted to have you with us, Dean Markham.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be with you. It really is a joy to be back home in St. Paul's. Do you know, it's interesting looking at that picture of me. We've got a new senior vice president for communication. She had the temerity to suggest that picture's a little dated. So I was delighted when I hired her. I'm now I'm still delighted I hired her. For the record show, I did not finish that sentence in any other way. Okay, right, so from the slightly aging, you get a vested interest in these studies as you age, I find, much as St. Paul famously said, to live is Christ, to die is gain, and of course that's true. But you don't necessarily want to rush to the gain. It's nice to continue to savor the joys of living in life in all sorts of ways, and even the challenges. So what's interesting is studies about the impact of church-going on health have proliferated since the early 90s. And the theme of those studies has just been consistent. There is a direct correlation between attending church. Now, let me just stress, this is less to do with what you believe, actually. So in other words, you can be a fundamentalist Christian, convinced the rapture's about to happen, go to a big evangelical megachurch, or you can be holding your faith with some nervousness, very aware that you have more doubts than certainties, but you still go. And you get the health benefit. Conversely, if you are, a person who loves the Lord Jesus, a fundamentalist Christian, worried about the rapture, but you spend all your time on the golf course on the Lord's Day, or in the Church of the Holy Comforter, you've been there when you pull it up slowly and think, okay, you don't get the health benefit. It is actually something to do with getting out of bed, donning some attire, and making your way, depending on which church you go and how colorful the preacher is that day. It could be an hour of moderate boredom or a moderate joy. Obviously at St. Paul's, it's always on the joy end of the spectrum, let me hasten to add. Okay, so I thought let's just start with those studies because people are surprised by this data. But I do think it needs to be better known. And there are literally over 1,000 studies now. Sociologists and health practitioners keep coming back to this question. That's partly because sociologists are a secular bunch of people. They sort of don't believe it. They don't participate themselves, many of them. So therefore, they're really puzzled about this correlation. So I've just lifted up a sample of those studies, and they're on your handout. Going back to 1999, this was a very significant study because of its thoroughness in terms of its research principles, and it's coming out of the Duke University Medical Center in Durham. And that ascertained that of a relatively small sample, 4,000 North Carolina residents, those who attend religious services at least once a week were 46% less likely to die during the 6-year study. That is absolutely significant. Now, if you factor in other things like age, race, how sick they were, you still have a 28% reduction in mortality. The study, also from 1999, the University of Colorado at Boulder, life expectancy. This is really interesting, I think. This, again, was a significant study. And those who never attend church, they would die on average at 75. Those who did died at 83. That's 8 years different. The research showed that those who never attend the services have an 87% higher risk of dying. Okay. Now, over the page 2, you'll see there this is one of my favorite studies from Harvard, relatively recently. This is 2016. 74,534, primarily nurses. Now, that was interesting. They went for nurses because what they wanted to do was sort of sort out other socioeconomic factors. And they figured that if they take a profession, you'll have comparability of socio-economic factors operating. And there they found in this longitudinal study that those who attended a religious service more than once a week associated with 33% lower all-cause mortality compared with women who never attended religious services. 2012, this I thought was quite a cool method. It was primarily a study of obituaries, and there again you found a 4-year difference between those who go to church and those who don't. And here I do reproduce the press release from Azusa Pacific University, because you'll find in that press release they give some reasons. So, for example, Dr. Filia argues it's high social interaction and lower rates of alcohol and drug abuse, and then religious support and coping in stressful situations are the key factors that they identify as to why church-going makes the difference it does. The Vanderbilt study of 2017, so there you have the data that, according to the study, middle-aged adults, 40 to 65, both men and women who attend church or other houses of worship, reduce their risk for mortality by 55%. I mean, this is like incredible, really. And notice that implies to churches, synagogues, or mosques. And we're less stressed and we live longer. I must admit, I looked at the news, I was less stressed, and I thought, my goodness, people who don't go to church must be really stressed. Because you don't always feel less stressed. The other interesting thing, I've also reproduced the press release from Vanderbilt here, University, and I want to draw your attention at the top of page 3 to allostatic load, which is a very interesting idea. Basically, it's the cumulative burden of chronic stress and life events, which break down in that top paragraph there as to exactly what that means. And it's just true that people who regularly go to church have a lower allostatic load than those who don't. The result is, if you go back to page 2, last complete paragraph, those who attend church or other houses of worship reduce their risk for mortality by 55%. Now, let me just stress, of course, these sort of studies are studies that are taking a significant population, and with any significant population, you have aberrations. My dear mother went to church, so as I think many of you know, I grew up in the Exclusive Brethren. One thing the Exclusive Brethren did very well was get you to church. You were required to go to church on the Lord's Day at 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 noon, 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. That's a lot of church going in just one day. When my son Luke used to complain about being dragged to church for 11 o'clock, I used to point out that he's had it very easy. So my mother went to church an awful lot, and she died at 54, bone cancer. So it's not like, there is a direct and inevitable correlation that your presence here will lead to longevity. There are still things called cancers that can make life very difficult for one. But what it does show is that we're now very aware in the medical sciences of non-material, if you like, factors, environmental factors that impact health. And there are growing literature around the importance of, taking a walk, right? Have you heard of all walks, AWE, walks? So the idea is, and again, they've done study of LD people. You can walk just with the purpose of getting from A to B, right? I need to go to, I don't know, somewhere. Or you can walk and just pause and search for things you admire. So that blossom, or that tree, or that Halloween yard design, whatever it is, and you just pause and consciously savor the moment. And studies have shown people who do all walks are less stressed, more likely to appreciate life than those who don't. So there's a whole literature now around these non-technically medical factors on health and how important and significant they are. And church is definitely in that list. So going right back to page 1, you'll see that there are 4 reasons often given in the literature by medical professionals. And then you've got my own 5 reasons about what might be going on. So, sure, high social interaction. Loneliness is a health crisis in the United States of America. The Attorney General, not the Attorney General, the... Thank you very much. Has documented recently about the crisis around loneliness. There are human lives, often in urban centers, very paradoxical. The more people you're surrounded by, the fewer people you know. It's odd that, isn't it? That's one of the inadvertent consequences of a city. The city's got the joy of anonymity, so you can be whoever you like in a city, but it's also a very lonely institution, right? If you want to actually have friends, you want to find a small hamlet or a small town of 600 people, okay? They're great because rapidly everybody knows your business. And knows you. So that's the gift. Urban life has come, increasingly Americans are living in urban centers, so we're as a result lonelier. Church means that you actually meet people and you make friends, and that's a very significant contributor to good health. Lower rates of alcohol and substance abuse. So, and that links with a whole set of, hopefully church has an impact on virtue. So you appreciate the significance and importance of moderation, and you're more likely to avoid certain unhealthy lifestyles. Religious support and coping, we all suffer from difficulties. We all suffer from challenges. We all have our moments when we need a conversation partner. Churches are good at providing that support and coping. And the reduced allostatic load. So in other words, all the other stress factors in our lives are mediated by presence in church. And I think all that's true. I don't have any reason to disagree with that. But I also want to just focus on certain distinctive things, which actually in the behavioral science literature, more and more evidence is pointing to the importance of these features, which I think are explicitly inculcated in church. And I list 5 of them there. The first is gratitude. So you've either just been to the 9 o'clock or you will be going to the 11 o'clock. And of course, the weird thing about the Episcopal Church is we do that same little liturgy out of that book. And the climax of that liturgy is the Great Thanksgiving. That's that long prayer, which starts with the celebrant thanking God for creation, thanking God for revealing God through the prophets and through the Old Testament narrative, and then thanking God for the disclosure of God in Jesus of Nazareth. And then, of course, and we'll come back to this in a moment, you actually then meditate on thanking God for a guy who died relatively young. And the other weird thing about this moment is you're reenacting the guy's Last Supper. I mean, When you think about it, it's almost macabre, and it's all called the Great Thanksgiving. I mean, it's odd, isn't it, really? You know, what a weird thing we're doing every single Sunday. In fact, let me just flow 1 and 3 together on the theological interpretation. So, but this is, do you know what drives atheists crazy? You know, so you can be a person of faith and you're in a car accident and the car's smashed to smithereens, but because car safety now is much improved, everybody gets out unscathed. And of course, what annoys the atheist is when the person of faith gets out and says, I'm really grateful to God that we're all okay. And that annoys them because they say, well, why are you grateful to God? Wouldn't it have been better for God to have prevented the whole accident than for you just to be grateful that you got out unscathed? I mean, and you're still traumatized, for heaven's sake. This is so stupid. You're bonkers in being grateful to God. It's like so stupid. They sort of want to strangle me, okay? But of course, when you think about it, that's the gift of the Great Thanksgiving. Because the paradox of Great Thanksgiving is there we are, thanking God for tragedy, but trusting in and through the tragedy is grace. And actually it goes inside. And it becomes part of our furniture of how we navigate the world and life. We actually do find ourselves in situations where lots goes wrong, but we search for the grace in that situation. We find ourselves uttering the sentence, my life in a whole host of ways is falling apart, but I'm grateful for. You can sort of see why that works health-wise. Because what's your alternative? You know, so if I'm a secular atheist, a humanist, right? And all I believe is matter, and you know, there I am, trundling along my car's smashed to smithereens, but fortunately, myself, my wife, and my son all get out of the car, but I'm still angry about the car accident happening, and I'm not finding any glimmer of grace or thanksgiving in the moment. I mean, what does that do to my blood pressure? What does it do to my metabolic rate? What does it do? You know, you can sort of see why there's a disposition inculcated in church that actually has a huge health benefit. And however stupid it might sound to the atheist, at least I will live longer. So there. But of course, we want to claim as a matter of truth that God is, and that God has designed this universe, not that problems and difficulties and illness and death do not inflict the faithful, because they all do, but that God will give us resources to find ways of living through those seasons where we're constantly aware of the grace and elements for which we should be grateful. And actually, although it sounds irrational to my secular friend, and they rib me about it, I don't think it's irrational at all. It's a very plausible way. If you believe that at the heart of the universe is goodness and love, enabling everything that is and sustaining everything that is, the definition of God for you, and if you believe that this is a moment and a season, which is part of a longer journey, which encompasses eternity, so death is a gain, says St. Paul. If you believe those things, and then in the journey of life, you find yourself encountering challenges and illnesses and problems and difficulties about which you're deeply insecure and concerned and worried, but you're constantly searching for the moments of grace for which you're grateful, then actually it's a very rational way of living and being. So that skill set, learning to be grateful and even being grateful and finding grace in the tragic, that skill set is a huge health benefit. The second is learning to savor moments. So we talked a little bit about the all walk. You know, it is a central biblical theme. The key word in the New Testament is often contentment. You find it in Philippians. You find it in Romans. So the idea here is that, you know, the weird thing about vacations, when you think about vacations, you look forward to vacations and you enjoy sort of talking about vacations, but while you're actually living the vacation, you're pretty miserable. You know, that's a well-documented phenomenon, okay? So why is that? What goes on that, it can be true the holidays as well. You look forward to Thanksgiving, you enjoy reflecting on the fact it was nice to see people over Thanksgiving, but you're so pleased that in the middle of it, you wanted to strangle your sibling or your uncle or whatever. So there's a lot. So what is it that can adjust your experience of time? Well, the biblical principle is contentment. It's the principle that you learn to actually live in the moment and savor the moment. And that can be anything. That can just be holding the hand of somebody you love. That can be, if you go to the effort to cook a really nice meal or have the privilege of going out to enjoy a really nice meal, then for heaven's sake. And what does savoring mean? Well, again, lots of studies have now been done on the impact of savoring. There's a whole recently published monograph called Savoring. And what it means is you just pause and consciously absorb the significance and joy of the moment. So whatever you're going to have for lunch today, I commend McDonald's fries. Savor them. Make sure they're really, really hot straight out of the fryer. So hot it burns my tongue is what I always say. And then just savor it. Just think this is a very nice taste experience. What's in the chocolate, what's in the wine, what's in that dessert, what's in, that pizza, what's in this moment, what's in that music, what's in that film, what's in whatever it is, consciously analyze the moment you're in and allow yourself to appreciate it. Now, that act in itself leads to a state that in the biblical witness we call contentment. Number 4, we live aware of the reality of our mortality. So it is true that, when you sit in church, the crucifix comes past. I mean, it could be an electric chair. It could be the hangman's noose. You sit and think, this is weird, isn't it? What am I doing here this Sunday? Watching this symbol of judicial execution by an authority walk past me. And what does it do inside me? Well, it does all sorts of things. It does mean that you are aware of the extraordinary gift of time and the fact that time is finite. It's often said, the gift of being young is wasted on the young. I definitely think that's true. Yes. And the weird thing about aging is life goes faster. I think it's partly because when you're going from 6 to 7, you're living 1/6 of your life. And when you're going, as I am now, from 61 to 62, I'm living 1/61th of my life. And of course, therefore, time does appear to go much, much slower. Talk to any kid waiting for Christmas, it seems to be aeons away. Talk to any adult, Christmas was like yesterday and it's coming around already. Next week, and it's been far too fast. So that perception of time is a crucial factor. And the interesting thing is, it's not that the symbol of judicial execution is not actually a despairing symbol. It's a symbol of hope because we believe and trust that through the death of Jesus of Nazareth, the very embodiment of God, the salvation of the world was made possible. So actually, it's a very life-giving symbol, actually. So that which is most tragic and most to be feared is God's vehicle and mechanism to new life. And this all becomes part of one's, again, furniture of one's mind. That's what being absorbed in a faith community does to you. It actually changes the way you function and think about and look at the world. And liturgy works almost subconsciously. So where most of the time you're thinking about what you're going to do next week or whatever, I really must answer that email. I need to get some milk in. Do you know, my wife and I had real problems this morning. There was no milk. So I'm a person of tradition, right? I just have 2 Weetabix and a banana. Weetabix is an English breakfast cereal which tastes like straw, okay, right? And so no milk. Okay, well, I'm calm because I go to church a lot. And so, so then rather pathetically, I wait for my wife to appear, and I say, Leslie, we have no milk. And she says, that's fine. You can have a muffin, and we'll have some bacon in the air fryer. So we start assembling everything. So we've got the kettle going, the toaster going for the defrosting the muffin and toasting it, and the air fryer going with the bacon inside. And, of course, then the fuse goes. Too many kitchen appliances going at once. And this is all, Leslie was trying to get to the 9 o'clock service. I was coming to this. But we kept calm. Anyway, this is what I had for breakfast, which makes me very aware of my mortality because it wasn't a very healthy breakfast compared to Weetabix. Anyway, I can't remember why I went there. So let me just move on effortlessly. So you know, you don't want to live just constantly in fear of death, but you don't want to ignore that reality. And what it should mean, why is it important to stay in relationships with people? Why is it important to forgive? Why is it important that when you depart, you tell each other you love each other? These things matter because life is fragile. And we're always invited to live life aware of that reality and its significance. The final reason why I think is that God really is there, and therefore what church inculcates is a set of attitudes that actually helps you live in relationship with the transcendent, which infuses everything that is and invites us into that relationship. And that's in the end the fundamental of faith participation, is you're looking at the world of right. So, I think there are lots of reasons to believe in God. I think the least plausible worldview there is, which I think is extraordinary that anybody believes it, is the worldview that says all we are complicated bundles of atoms that emerge from nowhere and going nowhere. Because if you take that materialistic worldview, you've got to explain art, morality, beauty, love. All these things are really difficult to explain on a purely materialistic, naturalistic worldview. It's a very implausible worldview. It's not surprising the overwhelming majority of people don't believe it. And the overwhelming number of people who do believe it, call themselves atheists, actually don't live it. Because in the end, they do think love matters. And they do think that art and music can take you into the transcendent. And so it's an utterly ridiculous way of looking at the world. The joy of church is you're invited to actually believe the world of right, and that's the gift of believing God's really there. So, why is church good for you? Well, all the data shows you've got to turn up. Ideally more than just once a week. I know Episcopalians, we sort of think we're regular if we make once a month, but it's good if you can. And how do you end up doing more than once a week? Well, you do it by joining something. And of course, then all the health benefits of church exponentially grow because you join a subunit. You join the choir, or you join whatever. You join an outreach ministry, you join something. So then you join, do we still do those dinners? Yep, you join one of the dinner groups. You then find yourself in a subgroup of people who you can reach out to when you're worried about a test that you've got to go and have because the doctor recommends it and you're not sure what the result will be, whatever. Then so I think the secular narrative is true. I agree with the first four reasons at the top of the page, but I think there are other things that God is doing. And the result is, I think Leslie and I, because of church, were less stressed this morning than we would have been if we didn't go to church. That's my guess. So thank you very much for listening.